Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello, everybody. Bob Lusk coming at you live. It must be 6:30 Central Time. Hanging out in Clovis, New Mexico with my dear friend, Dr. Johnny Funderburg. He and I have been spending the last 2 or 3 days as he recuperates from back surgery. And golly, we've had a great time hanging out. We did a little road trip through eastern New Mexico today, and it's just great to sit down and have an adult conversation. And I think he might agree with that. Welcome. Glad you guys are here tonight and see what's going on. I thought tonight I'd talk about stocking fish this fall. Looks like we got 5 folks watching. No comments yet, so you guys start chiming in with some comments, some questions and things. I see Drew Bachman checking in from South Carolina. Drew, good to see you, buddy. You know the drill. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section. Click like. Share this to your timeline, and guess what? You're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat. Here's one in living color right here, right in front of your very internet eyes, right there. Hey, Pond Boss Magazine, $35 a year, cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year while that Friday night date's gone. Frank James, Shreveport, Louisiana, fall stocking. Let's talk about that. John Funk, man, I cannot wait to hear how your trip to Hawaii went, man. I think that's so cool that you got to go do that. And you got back just in time to see a pretty nice little weather change up there in upper Michigan. Dave Weber from northeast of Kansas City, you know the deal. Also, before I forget about it, Debbie told me she knows I'm not going to talk about myself because I don't do that. I don't like that. It's not comfortable. But what she's telling me is to let you guys know that this book, that's been out about a year now, I guess maybe not quite a year, is available for Christmas gifts. You know, which, since it's not Thanksgiving, it could be a Thanksgiving gift if anybody does that. So I don't remember how much that book is, $20 or something, I don't know. All I know is I wrote it, took a long time to get it printed. It's available. Pond Boss Magazine, $35 a year. You guys chime in on that. Let's talk about stocking fish in the fall. And if you got questions about that, throw them right at me. See, John, what did you say? Hey, look at there's Doug Cusick. How did we know he was going to be watching tonight? What is a pond worth? How about perch at $28 a pound at the market? That's amazing. That's a lot of money. You know, but with the price of feed going up, with inflation like it is, freight transport like it is, you know, we're living in a pretty hard time right now, and I know we're going to get past it because we always have and we always will, you know. And but in the meantime, those prices, $28 a pound for yellow perch at the market. Here's my advice: eat it by candlelight, because that's going to be a special dinner, y'all. So 73 tomorrow, 35 over the weekend. Yep, yeah, John, I want to know about Hawaii. I want to hear all about that. So let's talk about stocking ponds in the fall. There's several reasons to do that. And one of them is if you've got a brand new pond and you've got enough water in it and you want to get your forage fish established. You know, so depending on your goals, which that's the first thing I tell everybody, what are your goals? What's the mission? Why do you have the pond? Hey, Peyton, good to see you, buddy. One of our top viewers right there, Peyton, he's from Shreveport, Louisiana as well. So if you're going to stock fish in the fall, I'd like to know your goals before I start telling you what to stock for a brand new pond. Now, a really no-fail thing if you want to stock a brand new pond in the fall, I have some criteria that I've figured out over the years. One, you want at least half the surface acres, half the pond covered in water, some of that water at least 8 feet deep going into a rainy season. That's my criteria. Now, if you've got, you know, if you're in an area where it rains quite a bit and you don't quite have 8 feet, that would be okay. But at least half the surface acreage covered. You don't want a whole lot of shallow water. But stock fathead minnows, bluegill, and red ear if you're stocking for largemouth bass. Now, for you guys in the Midwest and upper Midwest, we're going to get a little different stocking process. You're going to be looking at fathead minnows and probably some pumpkin seeds, something like that, depending on what the mission is, you know, what your goals are. I really hammer that that goal thing a lot. And you guys that watch this show very much know that. But if you're stocking a new pond, the fall is a great time to establish your forage fish. Now, we stocked a couple of lakes today in West Texas, one near Childress and one near Post, Texas, that have enough rain. Both of those guys asked me, should we feed the fish? Well, the water temperature there is down in the 60s, so they've probably got a month worth of feeding if they want to. But they stocked a bunch of bluegills that were about so big, an inch, inch and a half to 2 inches long, and both of those lakes have had water in them now for a couple of months. There's a food chain developing that will feed those little bitty fish. But if you want to feed them, you can. Don't be surprised if they don't find the feed quick. As when that water temperature gets down into the mid-50s, they're going to slow way, way, way down and not eat nearly as much. So you can choose that if you want to. Now, if you've got an existing pond that's already got fish in it, the reason to stock any fish in the fall is to make up for what the pond didn't produce, to feed some bass and feed your game fish. Might be walleye, might be smallmouth bass for you guys in the Midwest and northern tier states. But if they're not going into the wintertime in good shape, they could use a nudge if you don't mind writing a check for, maybe even up to 4 digits to be able to buy some fish to feed your precious fish before they go into the wintertime. Because the more weight that they can put on in the fall and even store a little bit of fat, then they're not going to lose a lot of weight over the winter. They can metabolize their fat over the winter and use it for energy, and like, for example, bullheads. In the South, bullheads are considered trash fish. In the North, they're considered a delicacy. But let me tell you why. Because bullheads can forage and eat. They're predator fish, but they also are scavengers. So they can eat enough to build up some body fat over the winter, so when they hunker down and stick their nose in the mud over the winter, they're going to metabolize all that fat, and when they come out of the winter into the spring in cold water, they're going to have fresh, flaky meat with no fat in it, and they'll be on the menu of a lot of restaurants up there in the north. So now if you've got an existing pond, you got to figure out which fish are lacking. So if you've kept good records, or if you did a fall electrofishing survey, then you can choose what fish to stock this fall. You may want to nudge the food chain by adding some adult bluegills, especially if you're in the south or the southeast. You could stock some adult bluegills now and expect to get a spawn right before the water gets cold, or in the bluebird warm days of February or January, they'll spawn then. So you can set the stage for what's going to happen for next year. So there's 2 reasons to stock an existing pond that has fish in it in the fall. One reason is to feed some bass, especially that are underweight, and to add to the food chain to prepare for next spring. And if you do that, you want to add some fish that won't get eaten by your game fish this fall and then over the winter. Let's see, James Allen, good to see James Wyatt. I see Wyatt checking in from Denver, Colorado, or maybe Abilene, Texas. I bet you he's in Denver right now. Jim Allen, 2 21-inch bass were caught here yesterday, 4.2 pounds each. That's 76 on the scale, but they looked great. All the classes seem low. Could that be a local shift in the scale? No, that won't be a local shift in the scale. That relative weight chart is true for all ponds for pretty much all circumstances for largemouth bass. If a bass is 76 on the relative weight scale, that means they're pretty far underweight. Now, that means there could be 2 things going on there. One of them could be that it's an old fish, geriatric, on its way out. That could be one. The second thing that it could be is that they just don't have enough food of that size to feed that size bass. And I guarantee you this, those are both females. So we know they spawned last spring, and they haven't regained their weight. It's either because that fish is old, or it's because they don't have enough food to fit in a mouth that's about that big around. See what I mean? All right, so let's see here. What about shiners? Timothy Chestnut says. This is a good time of the year to do shiners if you want to. Keep in mind, one of the things that I talk about often is that each species of fish serves its own purpose. And its purpose is unique for your pond. Okay, so golden shiners, you need to know that they're nest raiders, that they're quick, that they live in about the same niche as a largemouth bass, and they travel in schools of like-sized fish. So they're quick enough that they're probably not all going to get eaten over the winter. So you're going to carry some over in the spring. Now, they can reproduce as long as they've got the substrate on which to reproduce next spring. They'll stick their eggs on grass or aquatic plants or even small twigs or cedar tree limbs, things like that's where they like to stick their eggs. So shiners can be a good choice depending on that circumstance. Now, what is that circumstance? That circumstance could very well be a lake that is overcrowded with largemouth bass that are in the 12 to 14 inch size range, and you want to try to nudge a few of those bass up into bigger sizes to get them to gain some weight over the winter so that your mortality rates over the winter will be a lot less. Hello, Harrison Davis. Good to see you. Checking in from Georgia. Tom Davis is from Ohio. Frank James, have there been any quality studies on the impact of stocking small rainbow trout in December and if they help largemouth bass? The quality studies that I'm going to tell you is I don't know that there's been any empirical studies done. I don't know that because I haven't dug into the literature. I might ask Eric West to do that, and we'll see. I just got distracted. So the quality studies that I've personally done have been with electrofishing these lakes. So I had a couple of lakes in particular that I got to do that with. One was southwest of Oklahoma City a number of years ago, where we were real picky about the sizes of trout that we stocked based on the fish we wanted to feed. So we had some good length weight data on the fish prior to stocking the trout. And so that landowner knew that he wanted to try to feed his bass that were 2 pounds and bigger. So he wanted to stock 8 to 10 inch rainbow trout. And so we bought, I can't remember what it was, 500 or 600 pounds of them, $2,000 or $3,000 worth, and put them in this lake. Then we gave it about 6 months, came out of the spring and went and checked, and sure enough, the relative weights of those bass, some of the bass, not all of them, some of those bass, 2 pounds and up, the relative weights increased dramatically. So it's like that, the bass you were talking about up there, the 2 21-inch ones that Jim was talking about, those fish could likely have benefited from feeding rainbow trout because they could make up the weight loss difference with just 5 or 6 meals. Let's see here. Look at there. There's Jason checking in from Gunner, my soon-to-be son-in-law. Look at there. Hey, there's Ron Ardwin, and he's hanging out with the beautiful Jennifer, and it's her birthday. Everybody tell Jennifer happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Hope it's fun. Make him take you somewhere nice if he hadn't already done that. Over there in South Louisiana. That'd be a whole lot of fun. There's Jennifer. Yeah, I see Jennifer now. Yeah, happy birthday to you. All right, Jim Allen, any update on determining the age of the fish? I have communicated with those guys 3 times, and they've gone dark on me. Well, what that means to me is that they're getting a little bit of dissension from within their club, and they're having to fight through that, which I'm going to keep nudging them because that's what I do. I give people enough time to respond on their own. Then if they don't, I start kind of throwing a few little carrots out there to see if I can get them to respond. And I'm a little disappointed that they haven't responded, but I kind of get it because when you've got a fishing club like they've got, it's not easy for them to make decisions because sometimes it's hard to get a consensus, especially when they're getting ready to spend some money. Hello, Mike Cook, Boy Scouts from North Carolina. Let's see here. Harrison Davis, one of the best, if not the best bass pond I've fished, had a hardy established population of the golden shiners. Harrison Davis, I'm going to challenge that just a little bit. Here's what you're asking me questions all the time. I'm going to throw one right back at you. I want you to go catch some of those shiners. Fish with a little piece of night crawler under a little bitty bobber and catch some of them and take a picture of them and key them out and see if they aren't ruds. I have seen so many ruds, which we all mistake for golden shiners, but they have a red tail and a little bit of red tint on their fins. But if you can go catch some and take a look at them, Ruds behave totally differently in a pond full of largemouth bass than do golden shiners. They get bigger. First of all, they'll get to be 9 or 10 inches long. Golden shiners will top out at about 7, something like that. So I bet you over there along the eastern seaboard, there were a number of years where bait dealers sold ruds for bait, and a bunch of them got stocked into lakes over there. Now, it took several years before the Game and Fish Commissions in each state, the DEC in different states, figured out that those fish were not, that they were exotic species, but they were not really helping lakes and ponds. They were displacing some of the native species. And I've sampled a number of lakes over there in the Carolinas and in Georgia where I've come across ruds. So, take a picture and send it here. Hello, Mike Cottrell. Let's see here. Look at there, Stephen Martin checking in from Kansas. Good to see you. Let's see here. Doug Brown. Hey, there's Danny Mack. He got no notice of my video, and I thought it was missing. Came across it in a reel. Huh. Man, I don't know what to say about that. I'm not smart enough to figure out how to get the word out to everybody. I really need to sit down and take the time to figure that out and how to play that game. Let's see here. Let me scroll down here. Doug Brown, can't get any threadfin shad this year in my area in South Georgia, so I added 75 pounds of 3-inch juvenile copper-nosed bluegills today for winter forage to my 3-acre pond. You can't go wrong with that. 3-inch copper-nosed bluegills, if they're 3 inches truly, you're going to get a pretty good survival rate in a 3-acre pond of those. What that means is that some of those are going to grow up, add some adults to the mix as they're feeding some of your bass, and I just don't think you can go wrong with that. And I think that's a good decision. Good stuff. Way to go. Way to go. Let me see here what Doug Cusick's got. I put 24 walleye in my 2-acre pond, first and second year, total at 12 each time. So would have been 2014, 2015. So 7 or 8 year old fish now. I know they won't spawn, and I've only taken one 5-pounder out. How long can I expect them to live? Well, first thing, I don't remember the details on your pond, but I would bet you that there was some attrition. And if you had bass in there and unless you put in 8 to 10 inch walleye, if you put in 8 to 10 inch walleye, then your survival rates are pretty high. But if you put in 4 to 6 inch walleye, some of them likely got eaten. So now, how long will they live? You can expect them to live 10 to 14 years typically. Which sometimes typically doesn't mean anything. Let's see here. Wyatt's saying, hey, off topic, but post a football schedule. Well, those Mighty Gunner Tigers are into the playoffs, and it's really interesting. They had a game scheduled for tomorrow night against Texas Leadership, I think it was Texas Leadership School, but that team forfeited the game because a lot of their players flunked out. They only had 13 on the roster, so they canceled. So when I get the schedule, it changes based on who wins each week, because now we're in the playoffs. This is the first week of the playoffs. There's 6 weeks of that. But Gunner is going to be playing the winner of a game this week. We don't know where it's going to be until after that game, which I think is Friday night. But you know what? If I remember, I'll stick that up here on the Pond Boss Facebook page since you asked it. Number 59, Nolan Bakshees, left guard. The boy's having a really fun season. He's about 5'10", 5'11", probably a $165, $170, and he's going up against defensive linemen and linebackers as big as 275. And he's gotten some physics lessons this year called leverage, and he's actually doing a pretty good job. And it wouldn't surprise me if if Gunner makes it to the state championship in the Texas UIL 3A Division II. So you guys can go to Max Preps and track the stats there. But I'll try to remember to post the schedule. Let's see, Jeff Wallen. I lit my 12-foot cattails on fire today, a week late. It was snowing with the wind blowing cattail seeds. Well, that's kind of a manly thing to do. Yeah, well, I hope you're in a where the burn ban was lifted. But if you've got snow, you're probably good to go. Okay, Doug says they were 6 to 10 inch fish. I would expect to have a little bit of attrition of those walleye, Doug, but I bet you your survival rates are pretty good. Okay, let's see here. Harrison Davis, to do that, I'll have to drive almost 300 miles to South Georgia, but now you have me curious. Well, maybe you can do it by proxy. See if you can find somebody down there and have them do it, FaceTime you, and send some screenshots. Send them to me. Isn't technology cool? So, Stephen Martin, why won't they spawn? Walleye won't spawn in ponds. It's because they've got to have certain environmental conditions, like moving water, a water of a certain water chemistry. When they lay their eggs and the male fertilizes the female's eggs, they're semi-buoyant and they really need some moving water to be able to hatch. So what happens is almost every walleye that's stocked in all private ponds and lakes and many public lakes are stocked from fish that were hatched in a lab and then grown up to be fingerlings at a fish hatchery. Now, like in Kansas, there's one lake in particular that's such a hot walleye lake, but they won't spawn there. They won't recruit enough. So the biologists go, shock up adults, bring them back into the hatchery, strip the eggs, fertilize them with the milk, put them in McDonald's jars, and hatch them. And then when they get the fry, it looks like maybe the fry is almost as big as the head of a pin, and you can barely see what looks like 2 little flakes of pepper as their eyes. And then they take those and go stock them into the lake and let them grow up out there, and then survival of the fittest. So what else can you stock? You can stock, this time of year, you can stock feed-trained largemouth bass if that suits your goal, suits your mission. You can stock rainbow trout. We talked about that a little bit, but this is a good time of year to stock rainbow trout. Now, you can even do that in the South. Typically, most landowners wait until at least a week after Thanksgiving before they stock any rainbow trout, just to ensure that the water temperature doesn't rise. If the water temperature in a pond or lake gets above 70, it physically can't hold enough oxygen to support those trout. So there's a risk of death. So you want to be sure that the water temperature is down in the 60s, 65 going down, 60, 55 through there. And believe it or not, 55 is the prime operating temperature for rainbow trout. That's their favorite temperature. And they really thrive in water temperature at that rate. What other things can you stock in the fall? I remember working with a guy not too long ago, 5 or 6 years ago. He was in his late 70s, and he said, you know what? I really don't want to wait for fish to grow up. Can we go ahead and stock a pond as though it's been there for 5 or 6 years? The answer is yes, you can. You got to know what that looks like. So in that case, you're going to be stocking multiple sizes of the different species of fish into a pond with happy water and adequate habitat. Now, you guys that watch this show, you've heard me pound those topics pretty hard. Justin Ludwig, how hard is it to get rainbow trout in Texas and Oklahoma? It's not hard at all. There's a number of dealers. If you will go to pondboss.com, click on the resource guide, fish suppliers, look for the ones in Texas on the list, give them a call, and most of those guys will go book and buy rainbow trout up in Missouri and then transport them to Texas, just haul them down in fish trucks or fish trailers. So it's not that hard to get them, but don't wait very long, because what they try to do is take orders and get it all knocked out before Christmas. So if you're going to order some trout after Christmas, the odds are high that you won't be able to get that order unless they can consolidate a bunch of orders into one, and go make 5 or 6 stops. So that's what they do. Most of them do, because most folks want 50 to 100 pounds of trout. How much are they? I don't know. The price is probably up. I think last year they were, for 8 to 10 inches, it was like $5.95 a pound or something like that, plus mileage. Now that the Biden administration has let fuel prices skyrocket, then now they're charging freight bills as well. So now, look at that. Harrison Davis is poking a little fun at our Cajun buddy down there in South Louisiana. Why didn't you tell me there's a California Proposition 65 warning on that microscope? So it looks like Harrison bought him a microscope based on Ron Ardoin's decision and recommendations. So there you go. So hey, throw some more questions out here at me because I'm about to run out of topics about stocking fish in the fall, and I'll have to kind of be light on my feet and switch gears and talk about something else. You know what? Now that it hits me, this is the fall. So what are things you can be doing to get your pond ready for winter? Well, we just read one a while ago, burn off the dead cattails. So if you can safely do that, there's no harm at all burning off those cattails. Be sure and service your equipment. Somebody asked me today, how long can I feed the fish? Well, as long as they'll eat. Feeding fish in southern Florida is different than feeding fish in the middle of Iowa. I don't know where Michael Ehrig is tonight, but I know he's feeding fish in Iowa. And typically what happens is the fish that do eat, like channel catfish, bluegills, feed train largemouth bass, they're going to feed pretty well and start slowing down at 55 degrees. And once that temperature hits 55, they can get pretty sluggish pretty quick. Now, bluegill, I've watched them eat when the water temperature was 46 degrees, but the difference is they wait and let that fish food start sinking to the bottom, and they're going to catch it as it drifts down. They're not nearly as aggressive as feeding on the top. So feed them until they slow down. I leave my feeders out all winter long and let them run, because if you pull the battery and go freeze the battery, then the motors aren't running. I've had mice build nests down where the slot where the feed comes out. So I let the feeders run. It might cost me a battery because it's continually running and being charged every day. But I think it's better to run equipment like that than it is just to shut it down. Justin Ludwig, does burning cattails kill them? It absolutely does not. Because what happens is the cattails go dormant, the leaves die off, the catkins on top break loose and spread the seeds everywhere. And then when you're burning, all you're burning is what's dead. And they grow back up from their tubers each spring. So when the water temperature gets right, the sunlight gets right, those cattails will pop up and they'll grow back just as thick as they were before you burned them. What it does, though, is it eliminates all that organic matter from the pond, where those cattails can fall over and begin to break down in the water and just add nutrients and add more siltation to the pond, which is ironic because cattails' job is to keep loose soil in place, not let it flow down into the pond. So the cattails actually have a job. They feed in really mushy, gooey, mucky water. But then they also create their own muck when they die. So burning them is a good idea, but no, it won't kill them. Okay, Drew Schmidt says, pond is 4 feet low, great time to pick up unwanted sticks and debris. That's really a good comment. That's absolutely right. Because what I would do when we had our place, LL, we had those ponds were surrounded by oak trees. Well, when the trees' leaves shed and they fall into the pond, they float, and they'll float with the currents and with the waves, and they'll end up piling up along the shore, and then they'll sink. So what I would do is over the wintertime, I would let the ponds either drop by themselves or I would open a valve and drain some water down because I had a well to fill them up. So I could do that. And then let the water drain off of those leaves, and I would let them dry for a little bit. Now they'd be kind of matted down, but then I'd rake them into a pile, let them drain a little bit more, and then I'd burn them and burn the leaves. I did that when I felt energetic, which wouldn't be today. So, Drew Schmidt, that's a good call. Good call. Doug Cusick, I just quit feeding last week in Kansas. The water temperature is about 50. That's what I'm talking about right there. Doug's got it right on the money. Doug Brown, I was told that crappie don't do well, meaning grow over 7 inches or larger in small ponds. Small meaning 3 acres or less. All right, let me hit that a minute. That is not true. I've seen some gigantic crappie in small waters. But here's the problem. What that means is now scrolling past me here. You guys are carrying on a conversation. I love that. Once the crappie begin to reproduce in small waters, you lose total control of the numbers. And that's one of the big keys. Crappie are predator fish limited by their mouth size. So, and they're unpredictable spawners. Next spring may be the crappie spawn of the century, or it may be 0. And you don't know. And you won't know until it happens. So if you get the best crappie spawn in a warm water pond, for example, they're the first ones to spawn. So their babies are patrolling around coming off the nest as the other fish like bass and bluegill are beginning to spawn. So they get into the food chain and they can disrupt it, and that's when they don't grow very big. But I've seen some crappie. I saw a picture of a crappie that weighed over 5 pounds in a 1 acre pond. Now there ain't many of them. That's gonna be one of the problems. Since they're top line predator fish, limited by their mouth size, it takes 10 pounds of bait fish for a game fish to gain a pound. You're not going to have very many big ones in a 3 acre pond. And let's put that in perspective. You may have 25 to 40 pounds of crappie per acre. 40 pounds in a fantastic one. 25 pounds in a normal one. And if they average a pound, then you got 25 fish in an acre. 3 acre pond, you got 75 fish. And if you cull 20% of them, you've taken out 25 fish out of the entire pond over the whole year. So the yield isn't worth it compared to other fish that you can raise. The thing about crappie, when somebody says something to me about crappie, they're not talking about a fish that's going to make the end of the rod dip down like that. They're talking about a fish that they want to grow to eat meat because they like that sweet, white, flaky meat. I try to shift people more toward bluegills for that. Okay, so look at here now. If blue-green algae, Harrison says, if blue-green algae prefers phosphorus, why would sportfish pond fertilizer high in phosphorus not increase blue-green algae? Good question. Here's your answer. It's because blue-green algae nurtures best in waters that are imbalanced between nitrogen and phosphorus. So it's not the amount of phosphorus that triggers a cyanobacteria bloom. It's the amount of nitrogen that's not in there that's balanced with that phosphorus. So if the nitrogen and phosphorus are in similar volumes that the good algae needs or the good plankton needs, then they're going to be able to outcompete the blue-green algae. But if the nitrogen levels are off, too low, maybe even a little bit too high, that can trigger a cyanobacteria bloom. I looked pretty confident when I said that, didn't I? Okay, so Justin Ludwig says, so mechanical or chemical removal to get completely rid of them. Talking about cattails. Yes. So I like to refer people to the Aquaplant website. I think it's aquaplant it's .tamu.edu. I think that's it. But if you look up Aquaplant, go to the Texas A&M website. That's a fantastic plant website. And it can help you identify the plants and then give you your choices. Now, I've extracted myself from killing plants a number of years ago, and my good friend Kelly Duffy and I have a conversation about every 6 or 8 weeks, and so I kind of get updated on things that's going on. And there's a number of products. Used to, you had to wait till cattails were full grown, mature, like in June, July, August, before you could kill them. Now there's some herbicides where you can take them out as they grow up in the spring. So you can take a look at that. Mechanical removal basically means having to dig them out with a track hoe or a backhoe or something like that, which that can be a good idea. And in the fall or the winter or even early spring is a good time to do that. Don't do it in the summer, because you do that in water that's hot, you're going to increase the bio load of nutrients and set yourself up for a fish kill if you do it in the summer. But if you want to do it now, you can. Doug Brown, my crappie are black crappie and stunted at 9 to 10 inches mostly. Now that's typical. That's pretty typical. I see that happen. Yep. All right. So there we go. There's some answers to your questions. Let's take a minute and do a little commercial. I've got to tell you guys, hey, go check out huntbirddog.com. Now, that's my son Jonathan's business. I'm being totally transparent, but he is filling a niche. Jonathan is early 40s. He's got 3 small kids. He's busy, and he loves to hunt. But, his wife is a physician. She works hard. He works hard. They got kid activities. You can't get a hunting lease and do that right and go hunt. So your choices are, if you have a friend that's willing to open up the ranch for you to come cull some deer, or go hunt dove on opening day, you don't really have a chance to go hunt. You can go to to some of the outdoor shows and meet up with some outfitters and connect up with outfitters and book hunts. But what Jonathan figured out was he came up with a model. The idea was last February, and he can tell you more about it if you go to huntbirddog.com and get in touch with him. But what he did was he came up with this idea to pattern a hunting operation that's similar to VRBO or Airbnb. So what he's done is he's contacted through some of his helpers like a Spring Creek Outdoors, Macy Ledbetter and his group. You know, those guys are the best, some of the best wildlife biologists in the nation and premier wildlife biologists in Texas. You know, so what they do is huntbirddog.com partners with the ranch, goes and shoots quality photos, helps coach them through providing the best experience, and then figures out what they need to harvest through a biologist, a wildlife guy, and then they turn around and go out and market those hunts. So they put them on their website. And so far, I think they've had 13 or 14 events. They launched the business in July, early August, and now they've had 13 events, and they're getting their legs under them. So, you know, if you guys fit that demographic, if you don't have time to hunt but you'd like to, check out huntbirddog.com because that's a really, really cool concept. They have father-son hunts for like $1,250. They had an alligator hunt back in September, I think, or early October, harvested 114 alligators with guides. You know, another thing that Jonathan's doing is he's creating some events with some premier musicians and singers. He had a blasting cast on the opening day of dove season where these guys came in, hunted doves, had a private concert with Pat Green that night, and then went fishing in Matagorda Bay for redfish the next day. You know, and the prices are really pretty fair. I mean, some of them can be pretty high. Like if you want to harvest a world-class, 250-point whitetail buck, you're going to pay. But the experience is a big part of the deal, so check that out. All right, let's see here. I did one commercial. Let's talk about Texas Hunter Products. I love those guys. They are my go-to. Not only are the feeders great, the deer blinds are great, they have road feeders, they have fish habitat under the Texas Angler brand. So check out their fish habitat. At the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology a couple of weeks ago, Heath Stanford came over from Texas Hunter, put on a presentation, and brought a bunch of their products so everybody could see them. And what they've tried to do is fill in a niche where the other artificial structure companies haven't. So now, just like this industry that continues to grow and expand, we've got these different companies that are creating products and services to fill these different niches. So check out Texas Hunter Products. Customer service can't be beat. Purina Mills, it's almost time to wind down feeding the fish, but I talked to the guys there about 2 weeks ago, and they're doing some feed studies on comparing growth rates like in some of the different species of sunfish. So what they're trying to figure out as they go is what are the actual conversion rates in a confined area, and what are the growth rates, what can they be, and how does it affect the fish's health. So they're looking at some pretty cool parameters. Let's see. Easy Docks of Texas. If you can't tell, I just fly by the seat of my pants when I do this show, so I got to think of stuff. Easy Docks of Texas. David Schneiderman, fantastic products. If you're looking for a floating dock, now I'm going to say this right to his face. They're expensive, but they're worth it. When you start comparing these floating docks that you can piece together and put together, and they're easy to put together, they can be moved. If you want to relocate them, that's easy to do. You can add to them, because they've got all kinds of little different modules that you can add to, like for jet skis, or you can put a top over it, or, if you want to put a swimming platform out in the middle of the pond for the kids to swim out to and jump off of, you can do that. But I guess the expensive is kind of relative compared to the value. I know this, you're going to pay for them, but the value you get for that product is really good. So there we go. Man, I'm pretty compelling. If you guys aren't writing checks to somebody, I'm going to be real surprised. Justin, with the ponds being low, it's a good time to remove the cattails. That's true. Michael Eric, you're welcome. It's just as much fun for me to do this as it is for you guys to watch it, I promise. It's energizing to me. Keeps me on my toes. Timothy Chestnut, what's the best substrate for copper-nosed bluegill? best substrate, I'm presuming you're asking me what's the best substrate for them to spawn. That's going to be gravel. And specifically, let me get real specific about that. 3/8 inch pea gravel, washed pea gravel, 3 inches deep, in an area about as big as the hood of a pickup truck. In water, 18 inches to 3 feet deep, is perfect substrate for copper-nosed bluegill to spawn. Now, let's talk about the next substrate. When those copper-nosed bluegill spawn in colonies, they make little craters about 6 inches in diameter, 5 to 7 inches in diameter, and they make them in colonies. So there might be 15, there might be 50 nests in a colony, each one with a male bluegill running around in circles, keeping it clean, aerating the eggs. And when those eggs hatch, those little babies sit there for 2 or 3 days, absorb the yolk of what used to be the egg of when they were hatched, and that's their energy. And they absorb that yolk, then they got to eat. Well, they got to eat about every 30 minutes for the first day or two, or they're going to die. So as long as you've got some good substrate adjacent to your spawning beds, like places where they can graze periphyton, rock piles, PVC plastic, moss-backed fish habitat, Texas Hunter products, if you've got something that can grow periphyton on, or one of my favorites is American pondweed in the shallows right adjacent to these spawning beds. If you've got that sort of thing, then your survival rate goes up. So I think that answers your question pretty good. And now for big copper-nosed bluegill, I've seen so many of those hiding out under docks where the feeder is. That's pretty good. Leah Groons, hello, good to see you. She's up near Beggs, Oklahoma, near Tulsa. Larry Hardesty, I live in Hayden, Alabama, going to continue to work on habitat, going to wait to add brim in the spring. That's fine. You know what? And your key point is your last sentence. Fish guy says he will have fish in the spring as well. I'm seeing a paradigm shift with fish producers, where a lot of those guys go into the fall with a whole bunch of fish. They work hard to keep them over winter to have them available in the spring. A fair number of them the last 2 or 3 years have been selling out in the fall. You know, so that has shifted my thinking some. You know, where I'm all for adding some bluegill in the fall. The problem is they're not necessarily going to grow a lot over the fall. You know, they're not going to gain a lot of weight over the fall, and they're subject to predation. However, little bitty bluegill, there's not going to be too many migratory predators like cormorants, pelicans, anhingas, river otters that are going to waste their time trying to catch those little bitty bluegills. So, and if you wait very much longer in the fall to stock forage fish, then you don't gain anything at all. Like if you do it now in Hayden, Alabama, you're going to have 6 more weeks of growth before the water gets too cold. You know, but I totally respect what you're saying. If the fish guy says that he'll have some for you next spring and you're on the books, wait till the spring. Nothing wrong with that. Don't wait too late. You know, do it like about the 2nd or 3rd week of March. And you know what? They're going to start getting behind in the springtime really, really early. So be sure you're on their books. And it'd be okay to call them a couple times over the winter just to check in with them. James Allen from Kentucky, we're manually removing 40,000 pounds of riprap and gravel to our lakefront. Over 7 years, the soft-shelled turtles have tried to dig holes and pushed all the rock into the lake. That's some awful strong soft-shelled turtles. They got to be making turtle soup. I'm okay with helping the turtles, but getting too old to haul rock. Is there a non-poison turtle repellent? Yeah. Well, it's kind of poisoned. It's lead. You know, they're not hard to trap either. You know, you may have seen these floating traps that you can that float out in the water, and then they'll climb up on it to sun. Now you're going to trap a lot more mud turtles and sliders and turtles like that than you are soft shells, simply because those other turtles outnumber the others. You know, so Mike Cook's got the right answer. That's where I was going. But this is the first time, Jim, that I've heard of people replacing riprap because of soft-shelled turtles. So it'd be really interesting to track your progress on that and see. That would have to be a whole lot of ambitious turtles. Haven't met that many ambitious turtles. Most of the ones I know crawl over the riprap and go up in the mud, dig a hole there and lay their eggs and get back in the water as fast as they can. So, hey, don't forget Pond Boss Magazine. $35 a year, cheaper than a Friday night date. It lasts a year. And you guys, most of you done what I've asked you to do. And Danny Mac says, aren't they good to eat? Yeah, they are. I mean, you know, I've had many encounters with soft-shelled turtles over the years. On the very first fish farm where I leased way back in 1980, we were seining a catfish pond and caught a soft-shelled turtle that I bet you was 25 inches in diameter. It was huge. And so we snagged it with a dip net, put it in the fish tank, and went up to the concrete vats. And when we were unloading the catfish, I grabbed it and just pitched it down into a concrete vat that only had about 6 inches of water in it. And actually we put 2 of them in there. Well, I'd never cooked a turtle. I mean, I was right out of college, maybe 6 months, and I wanted to cook one. So I went down to get one, and I was going to butcher it and make, either fry it or make soup out of it, something. So I bent over to grab it, and it kind of turned around. So I pulled back pretty fast, and then it turned back around, pulled its head in, and then I reached around right in front of its back legs and grabbed it around the shell because I knew that if it could reach its head around, because they got a long neck, if it could reach its head around, it would bite me. So I grabbed that thing, I picked it up, and just as I spun around, that thing reached its head around and grabbed me right there in the ball of my hand and would not let go. And it didn't pierce the skin early on, but that thing probably weighed 15 pounds. So I'm trying to get it to let go. It's hanging from my hand, and there's an old adage that the old timers had told me is that, hey, those soft-shelled turtles, if they bite you, they won't turn loose until it thunders. That's true. So I grabbed the thing by the neck, held it up with my right hand, trying to shake it loose from my left hand without cutting the skin, and it would not let go. So I was in a little bit of a pickle. So I carried it to the house, kicked it on the back door. My wife opened the door, and she said, "Get that thing away from me." I said, "Honey, I really need you to get a knife and cut the head off this turtle." She wouldn't do it. So I had to, there was one of my workers down in one of the ponds. I hollered at him. He came up, and I was holding that dang turtle, and he finally slit its throat. And after it bled out a little bit, then it let go. Then I took it up, and I learned how to clean it. Now, that was before Al Gore invented the internet, so I couldn't go to YouTube to learn how to clean a dadgum turtle. So I kind of had to work my way through it, but I did. And we fried the meat up, and it was really pretty darn good. And since then, I've had turtle stew, and I've had fried turtle several times. It's really soft-shelled turtles are really pretty good to eat. So, I see what Jim's saying. Okay, so they can toss gravel 10 feet with a hind leg. Okay, so you're talking about gravel. When you said riprap, to me that's like baseball to softball to volleyball-sized rocks. Okay. And your soft-shelled turtles outnumber the rest. That's very cool. That's very cool. I've got to come over there at some point. Okay, so you found out that the neighbors dumped their dead squirrels, geese, etc. at your place, which is 18 feet deep. That's why you have a lot of turtles. I think I'd have a little come to Jesus talk with my neighbors. They need to eat those dead gum squirrels and geese. They don't need to dump them at your place unless they're having some kind of a satanic ritual or something, and yours is convenient. They don't need to do that. So they crawl up the riprap, pull it down. There you go. Okay, I see it. I got it. So let's see, what else can we talk about? Y'all keep throwing some stuff at me while I'm kind of pondering here, trying to be light on my feet. Oh, other things to do for the fall going into the winter. I tell you what, if your ponds will freeze this winter, if you'll get ice on them, if you've still got mats of aquatic plants, it would be worth it to buy a rake and do it soon and buy a vegetation rake, an aquatic plant rake. You can get those online. Matter of fact, I think there's a couple of companies that advertise in the resource guide at pondboss.com where you can buy these rakes and go pull some of that aquatic plant mass out of the pond and just let it dry on the shore. Just get it out of the water. If you can do that, then what you're going to do there is you're going to decrease the biological oxygen demand once you get ice on the water, and help minimize your risk of a winter kill. So you can do that, and that will help your pond. We've talked about feeders, aeration systems. I've had several people ask me, do I run my aeration system all winter? Well, I'm going to tell you, most of you don't need to. As a matter of fact, in the wintertime, if your pond's going to freeze over, I'd rather see it freeze over solid and be safe than have a squishy hole in the middle that's not safe. You know, if somebody or something falls in it, then there's an issue. Look at there, the Boudin Daddy showed up. Christopher Aguilar, South Louisiana. Good to see you, buddy. You're a little late. I don't know what's up with that, you slacker. You had that coming. You know you did. So, if you do want to leave your aeration system on all winter long in the fall, so you can, in the north, so you can have a hole, bring it in closer where the water's only like 4 feet deep, maybe 5 feet deep, and you can do that. Now, in the south, you don't. Once your water temperature, the magic number on the downside is 55 degrees. Once the water hits 55 degrees, your ponds have turned over. They're autonomous, top to bottom, with oxygen and temperature. You can turn your aeration system off for the wintertime, and now's a good time, or then would be a good time to maintain it. If you need to do a little repair kit or a tune-up kit, check your manufacturer and the model that you've got. A number of them, it's good to, a number of the models, it's good to do some routine maintenance in the wintertime before you crank it back up. Now, when do you crank it back up? When the water temperature hits 55 degrees. Yeah, Aguilar, you don't have to make excuses to me. I know your deal. You're a hard-working guy. That's what you do. You're always at it. That's one of the impressive things about you is you never say never. You always say yes, and you do what you do, and you're good at it. So I'm just picking on you a little bit because you're picking on me, and it's all in fun. But you knew that, Boudin man. So here we are. We're at 7:21, and I'm about to run out of topics. Let me think of something else. What else can we do to prepare our ponds for winter? I really like the idea of burning the cattails because that gets rid of some biomass. It's really time for maintenance. Something else, but once winter gets here, that's a really good time to enhance some of your habitat. And I'm talking about, I've seen some ponds up north of Kansas City where the landowner every year goes to the Christmas tree farm, and the day after Christmas he goes and picks up all the Christmas trees that they would otherwise have to dispose of. He takes them to his pond, he ties concrete blocks to them, drills a hole in the ice, lets the concrete block fall down on a rope, and then leaves the Christmas tree right there, so that after the ice comes off, the Christmas tree will go through and sink right there. Other guys put them in 5-gallon buckets with concrete, set them on the ice in clumps, and when the ice thaws, then here we go. Look at there. There's Chase. Chase is good. Chase is there. Good to see him. The whole family's celebrating Mama's birthday today. Y'all be sure and sing her happy birthday in Cajun for me. So let me see here. Looky there. James Allen noticed a lot of crawfish today. Is there something we can do to help them during the winter? No, not really. You can make sure they have riprap. Because that's the kind of crawfish that you have over there. The native ones love to hide in the crevices of rock. And one thing they're also doing is they're feeding as much as they can so they can store some fat in their tails. So they're doing what they do. If they can't make it, then they're going to get eaten, which that's not a bad thing. Aguilar added lime from Tractor Supply. 400 pounds made a huge difference. I bet that made a difference in the color of the water and your bloom. Greg Russell's asking where's the best place to get a thermometer from a nurse. Oh, God dang it, I can't help it. Sometimes that just jumps out of me. I like to do business with Bode Cycle Manufacturing Company in Henderson, Texas. But you can get those off of Amazon. The ones I like are they're blue in a plastic container. It's a mercury type thermometer. I just love those. But I'm 67 and I've been using those since. I got my first one from Jesus. That's how long I've been doing it. And I tie a little nylon cord on it, drop it down to where I want to check the temperature, give it a few minutes to adjust, and then look at it. And those are, and plus I carried that in my pocket when I was doing that. So Aguilar is looking for watercolor. Amazon's a good place, Greg Russell. Forgive my smart aleckiness. Leah made some PVC trees last weekend. Get them placed this winter. There you go. That's a good time. Greg Baird. Here we go. We got a little stand-up comedy going on. Hey, where's the best place to catch fish? In the water. No, right here. Up there, in the cheek with a night crawler. Doug Cusick. Yep, I cut cedar trees from my farm, put them out on the ice when it's safe, and let them sink. There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Harrison Davis. I read somewhere that golden algae blooms are a recent phenomenon. Can you tell me if that sounds about right? MPB, whatever that means. Mr. Pond Boss. Is that little acronym? So yes, golden algae blooms are a recent phenomenon in pond management. Now, I'm going to qualify that. I can't imagine golden algae not being present 35 or 40 years ago. I can't imagine that. But what I can imagine is we didn't know what it was back then. I can imagine that. Because I can remember back in the day where we had several fish kills, we didn't know what it was. We didn't have a way to figure it out, didn't know what happened, but it was in water, type of water, that's conducive for golden algae blooms. Now, golden algae likes to have water that has a slight salinity to it, cool, so it can outcompete all the different good algae, microscopic algae that we want in our plankton bloom that go away when the water gets cool. So I'm going to tell you that they're a recent phenomenon within about the last 20 years, 25 years maybe. I think the first ones that I knew of that I knew were golden algae probably was in the late 90s. So that had to be about 25 years ago. So that's about what I can tell you about that. Probably 15 years ago, we really started trying to figure out what can we do about it. And really, our first approach was don't let the water get that salty. Because most of the time that I saw them in private waters, it was from people putting water in their pond from an irrigation ditch from a lake that had salt springs in it. And another interesting little factor, we didn't see golden algae blooms in North Texas until the Corps of Engineers started blocking off saltwater springs in near West Texas to keep the heavy salt out of the tributaries of the Red River and the Brazos River. And when the salt quantities went down a little bit, it got into the window where golden algae could thrive. That's great. I just chewed up 2 minutes with that explanation, but that probably makes sense to you. Okay, Boudin Man says, I've seen your title for tonight's show, and I learned early in my pond years, don't stock in summer. Yeah, and that's really good advice. This last summer, I allowed some fish to be stocked, and actually not this summer, but this summer and last summer, I allowed some bass to be stocked into one of my lakes because that's when they could get them, was in July. And a little recent electrofishing survey showed that survival rate of those bass was 0. So basically, we lost 17 months of growth just because we thought the bass survived and we were letting them do what they do. The good news is the supplier is going to take care of it. He's going to bring in some bass that would be of the size that these fish would have been had they not perished. So I don't really like stocking fish in the summer. You lost 75% of your baby bass 1 year. And that happens a little bit more than I like to hear about. All right, so Mark Dyer, any ways of deterring otters beyond trapping? If I trap, I'm only allowed to trap one for the season, and if there's one, there's more. Trying to think of an easy way to tell you to teach a neighbor how to set a trap for you, then he can trap one, you can trap one, then another neighbor can trap one. I know this, that I don't ever tell anybody to break the law, especially in writing or on a public forum like this. I think if otters were destroying my fishery, that I would be creative enough to figure out how I could get rid of some and do it in a way that's legal. Now, elections were yesterday, and I'm not running for anything, but that is about as close to a non-political, political, correct answer that I'm going to give you. And you know what? Look at that. Timothy Chestnut, I should have thought of that. There's your answer right there. Check with your local game warden and let them know that you've got nuisance animals. That's it. That's it. Christopher Aguilar's expecting a load of bluegill this month. Well, good luck with that birth. Hope it works out. So, hey, guys, listen, I really do appreciate it. Hey, Beyond the Basics, that's a good Christmas gift. Or in Aguilar's movement, this is a good one for a good gift for Thanksgiving for your very best friends, especially if you have someone that know how to read. So if you have somebody that's got a pond, you know, this is a pretty good book. I don't remember how much it is. I think it's $20. Pond Boss Magazine, $35 a year. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight. I don't know where I'll be next. Yes, I do know where I'll be next Wednesday. I'll be with Ron Ardoin in south of Vicksburg, Mississippi. So if they've got internet, then I will be there with you guys. So if not, then I'll try to figure out how to be with you guys. So thanks again for hanging out. It's been a fun hour, been lively, and until next week, adios.